I stood on my brother's porch with his wedding ring in my coat pocket and almost turned around before I knocked. That was the truth. I'd driven 40 minutes across Grand Rapids in cold November rain, parked across the street like a coward, and watched the lights in the little white house for almost 10 minutes. And my first honest thought was still, you can mail it. Not because the ring was heavy. A man's wedding band is a small thing, right up until it belongs to someone who's gone, and then it feels like a whole life folded into a circle. Caleb's was plain gold, scratched near the edge from the summer he tried to build a deck without knowing how to use half the tools. Inside, his wife's name was engraved. Nora. I hadn't spoken to her since the funeral. I'd barely spoken to anyone since the funeral. That was how I handled shame. I put miles around it and called the distance respect. Really, it was just fear in better shoes. I made myself get out of the truck before I could talk myself out of it. The porch steps creaked the same way they always had. Caleb had meant to fix them. He'd meant to fix a lot of things, and that's one of the cruelties of dying. It leaves the unfinished things behind like accusations. I knocked. Then again. The door opened before I was ready. Nora stood there in jeans and one of Caleb's old flannel shirts, dark hair pulled back, her face softer and older than I remembered. Grief hadn't made her fragile. It had made her still, like someone who'd learned not to waste movement. Her eyes went to my face, then to my hand in my coat pocket. She knew. Of course she knew. I pulled out the small envelope and held it toward her. I came to return this. She didn't take it. Rain tapped the porch roof between us. Matt, she said. My name sounded strange in her mouth after so much silence. It's Caleb's ring. I know. The way she said it stopped me. Not surprised. Not confused. Waiting, her fingers closed around the envelope, but she didn't open it. She looked past me toward the street like she was checking whether I'd brought anyone else. Then she whispered, "He asked me to wait for you." I stared at her. What? She stepped back from the doorway. Come inside. My name is Matthew Carter, though everyone but my mother called me Matt. I was 37, 4 years younger than Caleb, and somehow always 12 in his shadow. Caleb was the good son, not in the fake way that makes people roll their eyes, but actually good. He coached Little League after 10-hour days. He remembered birthdays. He was the one people called when a car wouldn't start or a basement flooded or somebody needed a ride and didn't want to admit it. I worked vac. I fixed furnaces and rooftop units that rattled like they held personal grudges. I could listen to a unit for 30 seconds and know if the problem was electrical, mechanical, or just human neglect. People were harder. Caleb was good with people, I was good with machines. For a long time that made us a decent pair. Then, Dad died, and the lake cabin happened, and that's what split us. Dad had a small place near Whitehall, bad plumbing, slanted porch, pine floors that gave you splinters if you walked barefoot. But it was ours. It was where Caleb taught me to cast a line badly, and Dad burned burgers every 4th of July and called it smoke flavor. After Dad's heart surgery and the bills that came with it, Caleb sold the cabin without telling me first. At least, that was the version I held on to. I showed up one Saturday with a cooler and a toolbox and a plan to fix the back steps. And there was a crooked for sale sign in the yard and a stranger measuring windows. I called Caleb from the driveway. He said, "Matt, I can explain." I didn't let him. That was my specialty back then, being hurt too loud to hear anything useful. I accused him of selling the only piece of Dad we had left. He said the cabin was drowning in liens and back taxes. I said he just liked being in charge. He said I liked disappearing until the decisions got hard and then showing up angry. That one landed, because it was true. So I swung harder. I said, "You always wanted to be Dad's favorite. Congratulations, you sold him by the square foot." Caleb went quiet, not angry quiet. That should have warned me. Instead, I hung up. We didn't speak for almost 3 years. Then he got sick, colon cancer, found too late. By the time Mom called me, he was already thin, already talking about treatment like a job he'd finished through discipline. I went to the hospital exactly once. He was sitting up in a tiger's cap, trying to make Nora laugh about hospital pudding that had weaponized sadness. Nora saw me first. Caleb turned, and for half a second he looked like my big brother again, not sick, just surprised and relieved. "Matty," he said. Nobody called me that but him. I stood at the foot of the bed with my hands in my pockets and said, "Hey." 3 years of silence, and the best I brought was hay. Nora stepped out to give us time, and we wasted it. He asked about work. I asked about treatment. He joked about nurses hiding the good Jell-O. I smiled like a visitor, and he looked at me like he was waiting for me to stop being one. Before I left, he took off his wedding ring. His fingers had gotten too thin, and it slid loose in his hand. He held it out. "Keep this for me." "Why?" "Because you're my brother." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got right now." I should have sat down. I should have taken his hand and told him I was sorry about the cabin, the silence, the way I'd let pride harden into something that looked like principle. Instead, I took the ring because refusing would have been cruel, and I said, "I'll bring it back when you're home." He smiled, tired and knowing. "Yeah, do that." He died 11 days later. I didn't make it back in time. I stood in the back at the funeral, left before the lunch, and kept the ring in my glove compartment for 4 months. Every time I opened it and saw the envelope, I told myself I was waiting for the right day. There's no right day to return a dead man's wedding ring to his widow. There's only the day you finally stop running. Nora's house still smelled like Caleb, not in some movie way where grief preserves a room perfectly, but small. Coffee, sawdust, the cedar soap he liked, chili powder from the kitchen because he put too much in everything and called it character. His boots were gone from beside the door, and somehow that was the part that hurt, the absence of ordinary clutter. She led me into the kitchen, where 2 mugs sat on the table, though only one had been used, and a yellow legal pad lay beside them. She set the envelope with the ring down. I stayed standing. "You can sit," she said. "I'm fine. Caleb said you'd say that." My throat tightened. "Sit anyway." So I did. She tipped the ring into her palm and ran her thumb once over the gold, then closed her hand around it. She didn't cry, which almost made it worse. "I wondered how long it would take you," she said. "He told me you'd keep it too long, but you'd bring it back eventually, because guilt would get heavier than fear." That sounded so much like Caleb I almost hated him for still knowing me. "I'm sorry. I should have come sooner." Yes, that was Nora. Gentle never meant dishonest. She went to a drawer and came back with another envelope, my name across the front in Caleb's uneven block letters. "Matt." She set it in front of me. "He asked me to wait until you brought the ring back." His exact words were, "When Matt brings the ring back, give him the letter. Not before. If he doesn't come, don't chase him. He has to choose the door himself." I almost didn't. I know. "How long were you going to wait?" Something moved behind her eyes pane, and under it something steadier. "As long as he asked me to." I opened the letter. "Matt, if you're reading this, you finally brought my ring home. Good, I knew you'd come late. You always come late when you're ashamed." A sound came out of me I didn't expect, half a laugh, half something else. "I need to say this first, because you'll dodge it if I don't put it up front. I forgive you. Not because the cabin didn't hurt. It did. You said the worst thing you could think of because you knew exactly where to aim. That's one of the terrible privileges of being brothers. But I hurt you too. I made decisions alone because I was used to being the responsible one. And I let that become an excuse to stop trusting you with hard truth. So here's the hard truth. The cabin was already gone before I sold it. Dad had borrowed against it twice medical bills, the roof, taxes. He never told either of us because he was Dad and thought silence counted as protection. If I hadn't sold it, the bank would have. I used what was left after the debt to pay off Mom's house and the lien on your work truck. Yes, your truck. I knew you'd be angry if I told you. I was right about that. I was wrong not to tell you anyway. I read that paragraph 3 times. The lien on my truck. I remembered that year I'd been more than behind, nearly lost the one thing keeping my business alive. And then the finance company said a payment had cleared, and I'd assumed it was a clerical fix, and never asked too closely, because I was embarrassed. Caleb had paid it. With the cabin. With Dad's cabin. I put the letter down. Nora was watching me with tears in her eyes. "He never told me," I said. "He knew you'd think he was trying to make you owe him. There was more. Of course there is. I'm dead and still bossy." He wanted 12 Sundays, one a month for a year. Not for me exactly, for you, for Nora, for the family I'm apparently not done managing. You both know how to grieve by disappearing. I need you to learn something else. Nora has the list. Don't be a coward twice. At the bottom, he'd drawn a terrible little map with an arrow pointing to the words, "Ask Nora for the list." Genius, that stupid arrow broke me worse than the forgiveness, because death hadn't made Caleb holy. He was still my brother, still irritating, still sure he knew best, and right often enough to make hating him difficult. Nora slid the legal pad toward me. At the top, in his handwriting, 12 Sundays. 1. Return the ring. Tell the truth about why you waited. 2. Make my chili. Use the wrong amount of cumin like I did. 3. Fix Dad's porch step before Mom breaks a hip and blames me in heaven. 4. Take Scout to Riverside Park. 5. Go to the lake cabin. Tell Matt what happened. All of it. 6. Return Alvarez's toolbox. Sorry, Mr. A. 7. Watch a Tigers game, no leaving before the 7th. 8. Visit my grave and say one honest thing each. 9. Clean out the garage. Do not throw away my baseball cards, Nora. 10. Cook Mom's Sunday breakfast. She needs more people at her table. 11. Take the ring to the jeweler. Decide what happens to it. Together, 12. One last Sunday. No instructions, just show up. I read it twice. It was ridiculous and manipulative and beautiful and impossible. He wrote this when? The last week he was still having good mornings. And you agreed? To all 12? To waiting until you came. The rest was up to you. I pushed the pad away and said I didn't know if I could do this, and she nodded and said, I didn't think you would, and that hit harder than judgment. Then why show me? Because Caleb believed you might. She went quiet, and for the first time since I'd arrived, she looked tired in a way she'd been hiding. I want to stop being the only person in this town carrying him out loud. I want somebody else to remember how he cheated at cards, how he hated mushrooms but ate them at my mother's house because she scared him. Somebody who can tell me what he was like before I met him without making it sound like a eulogy. Her voice shook, but stayed steady. And yes, Matt, I want you to stop punishing yourself in a way that makes me feel like I lost both brothers. I looked away, because I hadn't thought of that. I'd been so busy making my guilt the center of every room I avoided that I'd never once counted what my absence cost her. When's the first Sunday? I asked. She almost smiled. Today, if you'll stay for chili. Of course he started with chili. He froze some. It's terrible. Caleb's chili could remove paint. And for the first time since I walked through the door, the house didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like a kitchen where someone had left instructions. The chili was every bit as bad as promised. The container was labeled My Award-Winning Chili. Award pending. The first item said tell the truth about why you waited, so I did not all at once. I told Nora I waited because bringing the ring back meant admitting Caleb wasn't the villain of the cabin story, because I'd turned my brother into someone simpler than he was, so I could stay angry without examining my part. She listened, and she didn't rescue me from the discomfort, and I respected her for that. When the chili was ready, we each took one bite and reached for water at the same time, and she laughed with her whole face and then cried before the laugh was finished. I didn't know what to do, so I did the only thing machines ever taught me. I stayed steady. I set a napkin beside her hand and didn't touch her until she reached for it. That became the rhythm of the Sundays. Not romance. Something quieter. The second Sunday, we fixed Mom's porch step. She opened the door, saw Nora behind me, pressed a hand to her chest, and said only, well, but I heard a year of prayers inside it. The wood under the paint had rotted clean through. Caleb had circled it on his list because he noticed everything. While I worked, I heard Nora and Mom talking through the open door. Not the hospital version of Caleb, but the real one, the turkey he nearly deep-fried into the driveway, the Lucky Tigers shirt he wore through a whole losing season because loyalty wasn't about results. Mom laughed in a way I hadn't heard since the funeral. The third Sunday, we took Scout to Riverside Park. Scout was Caleb's old mutt, white around the muzzle, the emotional confidence of a retired mayor. We threw a tennis ball until he decided the game was beneath him, then sat on a bench by the slow brown river while a guy in a Michigan State hoodie fought a kite with more hope than skill. Nora said Caleb used to see things at Meyer and say, Matt would hate that, like it delighted him. That he checked work vans to see if they were mine. That he'd kept my old baseball glove in the garage, the cracked brown one Dad oiled every spring, the one I'd left at the cabin this summer before everything went bad and assumed was gone. He'd kept it. That was the first time I understood what the list was really doing. He wasn't only forgiving me, he was handing back pieces of me I'd left behind. The fifth Sunday was the cabin. Nora saved it until I'd stopped flinching every time it came up. The place had sold years ago, but the new owners rented it off-season, and she'd booked one honest afternoon so a stranger wouldn't call the cops on a grieving field trip. We drove separately. I almost preferred it. The road in felt smaller than memory, the lake flashing gray and restless between the trunks. The cabin looked cleaner than my whole childhood new paint. Straight shutters, a mailbox that didn't need duct tape, and I hated the improvements with a stupid intensity. Inside, it smelled like pine cleaner instead of damp wood and old coffee. The bunk beds were gone. The floor didn't slope. Someone had replaced the ugly orange curtains Mom loved. Nora set a folder on the table and took out a single yellow note in Caleb's handwriting. It didn't explain the money again. I already knew about the money. It said, "Don't tell Matt unless you have to. He'll hear help as pity." I closed my eyes. "He knew you," she said quietly. "He should have told me." "Yes, she did that a lot," I told her, agreed when it hurt. "Lying would hurt more," she said. There was nothing weak in her eyes, but there was a kindness I didn't yet know what to do with, because it didn't excuse me and it didn't condemn me either. I finally sat down at that table. "I called him a thief," I said. "I know. He told me. And you still opened the door when I came back." She looked around the cabin. "Caleb loved you while being angry at you. I learned from the best." I laughed, then a real one. Painful, but real. Before we left, she walked down to the water, and I followed. The dock had been replaced too. "I thought coming here would make me feel closer to him," she said. "Did it?" She shook her head. "No, it made me realize he isn't trapped here. And I understood that because for years I'd treated the cabin like a grave. But Caleb wasn't in the floorboards. He was in the ridiculous chili, the repaired step, the dog who wouldn't fetch, the glove in the garage, the list folded in her purse. He was in the fact that he'd known both of us would need instructions before we'd admit we needed each other. "The sixth Sunday, we drove Mr. Alvarez his toolbox back," he said, "about time, and then cried when he found Caleb's note taped inside. The seventh, we watched the Tigers lose on Nora's couch and didn't leave before the seventh inning, because the list said so and because neither of us wanted to. The eighth Sunday, we visited his grave. By then, the Sundays had become something dangerous, not because anything improper had happened, because nothing had, but because I'd started to want Sunday. I checked my phone for her texts. I noticed her laugh in my memory. I wanted to tell her things that had nothing to do with Caleb, a customer who tried to fix a furnace with a butter knife, a sunrise over a rooftop unit, the bad coffee and good pie at the diner near my shop. And then I'd feel like a thief, because she was Caleb's wife and I was Caleb's brother, and wanting warmth near the place grief lived felt like stealing. The list said say one honest thing each. Nora went first, hands in her coat pockets, staring at his name. "I'm angry at you," she said, and the wind moved through the cemetery grass. "I'm angry you left me instructions like homework. Angry you knew me well enough to know I'd follow them. Angry I still hear your voice when I forget where the spare batteries are. And angry that some Sundays I laugh with your brother and then hate myself in the car." I looked at her sharply, but she only looked at the stone. "I'm not sorry I laugh," she whispered. "I'm just scared of what it means." Then it was mine. I stepped closer. "I blamed you because it was easier than admitting I needed you," I said. "I let one fight become 3 years because pride felt stronger than apology. Then you got sick and I told myself there'd be time. There wasn't." My voice cracked. "I miss you, Caleb, and I hate how much of what we had left I wasted." The cemetery didn't answer, but Nora reached over and touched my sleeve, not my hand, just my sleeve. Barely anything, and it steadied me anyway. After that, she tried to stop the list. She canceled the 9th Sunday for a headache, then stopped replying as fast, then told me she could handle the garage herself. I drove over after work that Wednesday, and found her in Caleb's garage, dust in her hair, crying over a stack of baseball cards, angry tears, not delicate ones. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "The door was open. That's not an invitation." She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. "I can't do this anymore." I stayed by the door and said okay, and she said, "No, don't do that, don't be understanding, it makes it worse." She dropped the cards in a box. Caleb thought he was helping. Maybe he was. But I feel like he made me promise to build a bridge and then left me standing in the middle of it. "What happens when the list ends, Matt?" She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Do you keep coming because Caleb told you to, or because you want to?" The question opened something neither of us could close again. I stepped fully into the garage. "I want to." She looked away. "That's what scares me." I loved him. I still love him. I can't be the woman who turns her husband's brother into something else because grief made us lonely. You're not. How do you know? Because if this were only loneliness, it would feel easier. She laughed once through the tears. "That's a terrible comfort. It's all I've got." She sat on an overturned crate. "I don't want Caleb to become a reason we hide," she said, and I told her neither did I. "But I don't want him to become a permission slip either." That was the line that stayed with me, because she was right. His letter could forgive us. His list could put us in the same room. But it couldn't decide what we were allowed to feel after that. That part had to be ours. "We finished the list," I said, "because we started it for him. But after that, if I knock on your door, it won't be because my brother wrote it down." Her face softened. "And if I open it, then that'll be your choice too." The 10th Sunday, we made Mom breakfast, and she hugged Nora like she'd been waiting for permission too. The 11th, we took the ring to the jeweler, a small downtown place with squeaky floors and a bell over the door. The list said decide what happens to it. Together, the jeweler asked if we wanted it resized, polished, sold, stored, remade, and Nora opened her purse and took out one last folded note, because my brother had never met a posthumous instruction he didn't like. She read it aloud. "If you two are standing in the jewelry store, congratulations. Matt, you made it further than I expected." I rolled my eyes hard enough that she almost smiled. "The ring is Nora's first. Always, but if she wants, I'd like the gold split. Not because love splits, because it carries. Make something small for Nora, something she can wear when she wants me close without wearing widowhood on her hand forever. And make something for Matt too, if he'll take it. A key ring, maybe, something sturdy and not dramatic since he hates feelings with accessories. Save the engraving. Nora's name belongs with the story. In the end, she chose a thin pendant made from part of the band. The original engraving hidden inside where only she would know. For me, the jeweler made a small, flat ring of gold on a key ring, practical, sturdy. Exactly the kind of emotional object I could pretend was useful. When we picked them up, Nora cried in the parking lot, and so did I, and neither of us apologized. The 12th Sunday had no instructions, which was the cruelest one of all. Just show up. I arrived at 5, with no toolbox, no food, no legal pad, no Caleb voice in my head telling me what came next. Scout barked once. Nora opened the door before I knocked, in a blue sweater, the pendant resting under her collar where I couldn't see it but knew it was. "You came," she said. "So did you. I live here. Still counts." There was dinner on the stove, not chili, thank God. We ate at the table with no list between us and no ring and no envelope waiting. Just two people who'd walked through a year of grief on the same Sundays and reached the edge of the map. Afterward, she took 2 mugs of coffee to the porch, where the step didn't creak anymore, and we sat and listened to a dog barking down the street in the wind in the bare trees. "I don't know what to do now," she said. "Neither do I." That's not reassuring. It's honest. She smiled into her coffee. Then it faded. "I'm afraid people will think it's wrong," she said, and I knew she meant us, not an us yet, but the possibility. I told her people might. "What do you think?" she asked. I looked at the key ring in my hand, the small piece of Caleb's band catching the porch light. I think I spent years believing loyalty meant staying angry. Then I thought grief meant staying alone. I've been wrong enough that I'm trying to stop trusting my first fear. "I loved your brother," she said. "I'm always going to." "Good," she searched my face. "Good?" I don't want a version of you that doesn't love Caleb." The words surprised us both, but once they were out, I knew they were true. He wasn't in the way. He was part of why we were sitting there at all. "I don't want you to become a substitute for him," she said. "I can't. I'm not him. I'm the brother who came late." She touched the key ring in my hand. "But you came. And that was grace. I think not making the late person pretend he was on time. Just letting him arrive." I turned my hand so her fingers rested against mine, not quite holding. "Not yet. I want to come next Sunday," I said. "No list, no Caleb telling us to. Because I want to see you." The porch went quiet. Then Nora slid her hand fully into mine, warm against the cold. No music, no sudden kiss, no promise bigger than we could carry. We didn't kiss that night, and that matters, because some stories rush grief so the romance can win, but grief wasn't an opponent. It was sitting right there with us, in the key ring and the pendant and the fixed step under our feet, and the brother who'd annoyed us into healing from beyond the grave. The rest didn't replace any of that. It grew up carefully beside it. She kissed me first, months later, after a Tigers game they lost badly enough that Caleb would have blamed the bullpen, the umpires, and probably me. She turned off the TV and said, "I'm tired of being scared of every warm thing," and then she did. Softly, like both of us knew there were names in the room that deserved respect. I came to Nora's house that first night to return the last thing of Caleb's I thought she had left. I didn't know he'd turned it into a door. He asked her to wait for me, not so I could take his place. And not so she'd stop loving him, but because he knew I'd come late. And he knew she kept promises longer than most people keep hope. And he knew we were both the kind of people who could mistake being alone for being loyal. The 12 Sundays didn't fix everything. They did something better. They gave us enough time to tell the truth. I still carry the key ring made from his band. It hangs with my truck keys, scratched now from daily use. Practical enough that I can pretend I don't touch it when I'm thinking. Mom's porch step is solid. The glove sits on a shelf in my house, and I oil it every spring. And Sundays are still Sundays, sometimes with Mom, sometimes at the park, sometimes doing nothing in Nora's kitchen while soup simmers and the Tigers disappoint us in familiar ways. Sometimes we talk about Caleb. Sometimes we don't. Both feel allowed now, and that's the part I wish I'd understood sooner. Forgiveness isn't a door someone else can push you through. You still have to knock. I came late, and I came ashamed, with a ring in my pocket and every excuse ready, and when Nora whispered he asked me to wait for you, I thought my brother had handed me one last burden. I was wrong. He'd handed me the way home.